till the main line gets to green, and then they can either go through or turn left. And then same thing you can see here on the right, some more idea when the bike box goes across multiple lanes. They come up here, they wait for the red, and then they can either go through or they can get it in front of the left turn lane and turn left. So that's how these work if you've seen them before. The main purpose of these is that it is a safety measure to mitigate right hook versus bike conflicts. So what can happen if you don't have one of these is, say in this example in the top right, when the main line gets to green, both the bike and the vehicle can proceed. If this vehicle is trying to make a right turn, it allows for bikes to get in front of the vehicle while it's red, and then they go first in front of the vehicle, which eliminates that conflict. And also, it just helps, it's this big green bike box that helps make bikes more visible at the intersection and allows them to get in front of the cars, which makes it safer. One thing to note is that these can be used to facilitate left turns. So if you have the bike box extending in front of the left turn lane, like you can see here in the bottom right. However, this is not mentioned in the MUTCD. The MUTCD just talks about mitigating right hook conflicts. And the reason being is that this is not the preferred way to provide left turns for bicyclists. It works, but it's very awkward for cyclists, just especially if the bike box goes across multiple lanes. It's awkward for cyclists to kind of scoot across multiple lanes, to get over here to the left turn lane. And also, if the light is green when they arrive, this doesn't work because they can't get into the bike box while it's green because vehicles are coming. So they have to sit and wait in the bike lane, blocking that bike lane for any bikes who want to go through. So because of this, where possible, it's better to provide either a two-stage bike box or a protected intersection to facilitate those lefts. But in some cases, this isn't feasible, and the regular bike box is the only way to facilitate those left turns. So to go into some of the standards for this, again, I can't cover everything today, but these need to be minimum 10 feet long with at least one bike symbol in them, but it can have multiple. If the stop bar is relocated when you install the bike box, or there's not one there, then you install it and push the stop bar back. You have to reevaluate the yellow change and red clearance intervals, just to make sure that you're accounting for the extra time the vehicle needs to get for the intersection because you push the stop bar back. And then also, if you have a bike box across multiple lanes, you need to make sure that you're providing these pedestrian countdown heads so that if a bike arrives when the signal is red, they know they have enough time to get over to the left turn lane. If it's red but about to turn green, they don't want to be halfway through and then the light turns green and then they're stuck. And then lastly, similar to a lot of the other things I've talked about, right on red shall be prohibited for the lane with the bike box. So it would be this right would have a no right on red. Again, to keep vehicles, when there are bikes waiting in the bike box, you don't want people trying to turn right on red and hitting them while they're waiting in the bike box. And then lastly, this is just guidance. It's not a standard, but the guidance is that a bike lane should be used on the approach to a bike box. This is so that bikes can actually get to the bike box when there's traffic queuing at the intersection. Otherwise, they're just stuck waiting behind the vehicles, and the bike box doesn't do you a lot of good. So this is an example from our Memorial Drive project. Again, wish I had photos to actually show it in the field, but this is the plan for it. You can see two examples here. This one on the top is a bike box on the side street. So you can see this is one way of if you don't have a bike lane, on the road where you're trying to put one, but there's bike traffic on it. You can see that we have sharrows on this road, for instance. You can develop a bike lane like this approaching the bike box, and that allows for bikes to use it. And then you can also see here on the right an example. So this is a case where we didn't have room to do the two-stage bike box. And also because of just the weird configuration of this intersection, it wouldn't have worked. So this is the case where we wanted to facilitate this left because this street is a bike corridor. So we did use a bike box here to facilitate that left turn, even if it's not ideal. So next up, I want to get into one of the more complicated things that were added, bicycle signals. So these are traffic signals, but they have a bike signal in them. So you can see in the top right what these look like. So these shall only be used for designated bicycle facilities. And the big one on this is that they shall only be used with a protected bicycle phase. So this means that when you have a bike signal, you have to prohibit when that phase is green the right turns and the left turns across the bike facility. So it has to be a protected phase with nothing conflicting with it. And also, just a note, these shall not be used with hybrid beacons, so you can't put these on a PHB. And then one thing I love that they included is that the signal indications can be your standard 12-inch. You can also have smaller ones that are either 4 or 8 inches. So I wanted to show here on the bottom right, this is an example from Seattle, but you can see they have these little baby bike signals, these little ones you put on the near side for bikes so they can see the signal indication. These are little 4-inch ones, and you can see down on the far side, they have the full-size one. And then also you can see, kind of hard to see, but there's a no turn on red here, and then this is a red arrow to make sure to prohibit that right turn. And there's something similar for the left turn to prohibit that when the phase is green. So this begs the question, why is the MUTCD so insistent? Why is it requiring that we have this protected bike phase? What is the benefit of that? So the reason being is that having a protected bike phase significantly improves bicyclist safety by eliminating the left and right hook conflicts. So you can see here, this cycle track has the green. You could have vehicles turning right through it, or you could have vehicles turning left through it, and that creates a hazard for bicyclists. Specifically, one of the biggest concerns is when you have a two-way facility, like is shown here, the left turn versus the bikes going the wrong way in the two-way facility is a special concern, because what can happen is that as the cyclist is coming down, this vehicle trying to make the left is looking towards oncoming traffic to see if they have the gap. They're not looking behind them to see if a cyclist is coming from their direction in the cycle track. This is one that's of a special concern just because vehicles aren't going to see a cyclist coming the same direction as them and may hit them making that left. So for this reason, obviously you don't have to use bike signals. You can just use regular signals and not provide the protected bike phase. But it is GDOT preference to provide a protected bike phase specifically for these two-way facilities to mitigate that contraflow left hook conflict. And then one of the big concerns with this, of course, is the vehicular impact of it. If we're doing this protected bike phase, that's adding, that may impact your vehicular operations because you're having to prohibit those turning movements. But one of the ways to mitigate this is you can use bike detection to actuate the bike phase. So it's only being called when there's actually a bike there, and that really helps mitigate some of those impacts. So lastly, I just wanted to provide some examples of how to accommodate these protected bike phases. So these aren't in the MUTCD. These are, again, from that draft update to the AASHTO Bike Guide, but I think they're really helpful, so I wanted to share. Two ways of doing it is you can have either an exclusive or a protected bike phase. So on the left, you can see this is an exclusive bike phase. So you can see the blue lines are the bicycle movements. So this is where you just prohibit all vehicular movements during the bike phase, and the bikes can go any direction they want, similar to a pedestrian scramble. And you can even run these concurrent with a pedestrian scramble. So this is one way of facilitating that, especially if you have a lot of turning movements, this can be helpful. And then the other way of doing it, you can see on the right, is a protected bike phase. So this is where you run the parallel through movement concurrent with that bike phase. So you can see there's no conflict if you run the through while the bike lane is going through. The challenge with doing this, this is going to have much less of a vehicular impact than doing the exclusive phase because you can still move cars through the intersection during that bike phase. But the challenge then becomes prohibiting those turning movements. So you can see in the example here, they're assuming that you have a right turn lane and a left turn lane here. But if you don't have those turn lanes, it gets more difficult to provide this protected bike phase. So I wanted to provide an example of how we did it on Memorial. So on Memorial, and this is a common case when you're doing these roadway reconfiguration projects, is we have left turn lanes, but we don't have right turn lanes. It's just a through lane and a left turn lane at most of the intersections. So what we did is we have a protected bike phase because we do have that two-way facility on Memorial. So we have a protected bike phase, our phase 9, and it is triggered by bike detection. So it will only be called when a bike is actually there. And during this phase 9, the bikes get the green with the bike signal, so they can go in both directions. And then the eastbound vehicles can go through. And then all other vehicular movements are prohibited. The reason being is that the reason we don't allow for the westbound through is because since we don't have a right turn lane, there's no way for us to prohibit that right. If we did, someone waiting to make the right would just block the through lane, and then people would get upset. Someone's prohibiting them from going through when the light is green because they're trying to make that right. So we just go ahead and prohibit that westbound through, and then we have no turn on red to make sure that people can't make that right turn on red and conflict with the cycle track. But we don't have this problem with the eastbound through, so we can at least run that concurrent with the bike facility to have the minimal vehicular impacts that we can while still maintaining that protected phase. And then also wanted to just point out that because we have this bike box here, we also have no turn on red for the southbound vehicles as well. So this is what it looks like when you bring all these pieces together at an intersection, how we actually make it work. And this is just different ways to do it, but this is what worked for us on Memorial. So that's all I had for y'all for today. So to sum it up, the new MUTCD has a lot of new elements that you can use to improve bicyclist safety and bike connectivity. So some of these are for safety. You can use green pavement to make bike lanes more conspicuous. You can install separated bike lanes that provide vertical separation between bikes and the vehicular lanes. You can use bike boxes to mitigate the right hook conflicts. You can use bike signals to clearly indicate when bikes can go for the intersection and also provide that protected bike phase, to eliminate those right hook and left hook conflicts. And then lastly, you need to use no turn on red for many of these elements to eliminate that right hook conflict. And then there's also elements for to improve bike connectivity, specifically to allow for left turns. So that's largely what the two-stage bike boxes are for. And then also there's been an overhaul. Didn't have time to cover it today, but there's been an overhaul to bike signage as well. So I highly encourage you to check that out as well. So that's what I have for y'all. Hope you found that informative, and thank you for coming.
Thanks, Connor. Next up, we have Kelly Roberts and Teresa Macias. Kelly Roberts graduated from Georgia Tech with a bachelor's in civil engineering. So nice. She only needed to do it once. She is a registered professional engineer in the state of Georgia. Kelly has been with GDOT for the past 3 years and manages this safety program out of the TMC. She currently leads the ITE Safety Committee, so see her to join, and is passionate about traffic safety culture. Kelly wants to challenge you to think about what you could be doing more to move the needle in our industry. And Teresa is a civil engineer at GDOT, working with the traffic safety program since August 2023. She studied civil engineering at Georgia Southern University and developed an interest in transportation after completing an internship with GDOT District 5. Outside of work, she enjoys gardening and traveling.
All right, one moment to get adjusted. I'm a little bit shorter. Good morning, everyone. So I am so excited to be here. This is actually my 4th summer seminar. The first year that I came, it was 2021. So it looked very, very different. I think both of these rooms were open to maintain social distancing. We were all spread out through what are those circular tables, things like that. And I had just started as a supervisor for the safety program. We're excited to be here as the manager now of the program with my truly exceptional staff that you're hearing from today. So I want to give them another round of applause. Truly could not do it without them. So today we have a really exciting presentation for you about systemic school zone improvement. So starting with 3 takeaways here. Safety is a priority across the board. Number 1 for GDOT in all projects that we pursue outside of the safety program. And 2, there is an incredible national emphasis on safety in general. And I'll go over the initiatives that have come down from the federal level that show what a national crisis that these traffic fatalities have become. Number two, safety is proactive. We have to understand that there's a certain randomness to crashes, right? I think as an industry, we've been diving more into near miss and what does that mean? And I think through that, we've understood that, 1 second makes an incredible difference. There's all of these tiny factors that can really change the outcome, whether there's an incident at all or the severity of an incident. And you have to understand that there is a certain randomness to that. And these traffic fatalities and serious injuries are also very spread out over space and time. And so the best way that I and my team find to mitigate that is by also spreading out those safety countermeasures over space and time, as well as being proactive with those. And so we're kind of taking those all together, and we have developed some systemic school zone improvements with that proactive initiative in mind. So really excited to go over the methodology we've created and some of the what we'll define as success for this initiative. So going into the crash data, this is back before the 2023 data was finalized from NHTSA. I think it is finalized now, but there were approximately 42,000 fatal crashes last year in 2023. So imagine what a typical plane has, about 200, maybe 210 seats. Imagine if that many incidents were happening in our aviation industry, how much more serious, this would be taken as an issue. So you really can't get over the fact that this is a nationwide crisis. And that leads to the nationwide significance as this as well. This is not only being, recognized on the local level, the state level, but also the federal level. First and foremost, with the signing of IIJA, or a bill that has significantly increased our state's federal funding, HSIP, Highway Safety Improvement Program, that's where the safety program gets our dollars. And so that actually increased the state's apportionment, federal apportionment. With that, they also came out with something called the VRU, Vulnerable Road User Special Rule. So if 15% of your fatalities that year were documented to that emphasis area, the following year, you shall spend a minimum of 15% of your federal apportionment towards that emphasis area. So not only is it crashes, but they're also identifying a certain user group who is clearly more vulnerable. I'm sure many of you guys have heard about this, but Safe Streets for All. Billions of dollars out there on the table, direct federal to local funding, all again with safety in mind, both for planning and construction. I mean, it could not be more obvious, like how much emphasis there is on this at a nationwide level. Last year, there was the first AASHTO Safety Summit, where a lot of state DOTs and safety managers got together and got to peer exchange with FHWA. That was incredible. It was in Kansas City. And the second one will be held this year in Houston. So again, more and more emphasis. AASHTO still said, we're not doing enough. We're going to come out with a national road safety strategy call to action. And not only that, we're going to ask all of your state DOTs, what are you doing? What are you doing specifically this year to move the needle that you didn't do last year? And so every month, FHWA, with Meg and Alan and Andrew, they'll check up on me and say, what's your status? What progress are you making to complete what you said you would do differently this year? There's another initiative by FHWA. It's called Everyday Counts. They have plenty of initiatives, but every year they come out with a safety initiative. We are currently on round 7. That's a little bit more of a longer term initiative. It's about a 3-year progress, but still checking in with FHWA, giving progress reports and things like that. And so this most recent FHWA, we call it EDC, or Everyday Counts initiative, round 7, that GDOT is participating in, is specifically about nighttime visibility for safety. That they highlight there is visibility for school zones. And so that was a little bit of the background for the systemic initiative that we've developed today. So I've talked a lot about the nationwide level and the issues there. So what's going on in Georgia, and what are we as a safety program going to do about it? So ultimately, our goal is to eliminate fatal and serious injury crashes. And my job is to identify and develop projects that are best aimed at reducing those. So like I said, we're federally funded. We have certain safety performance targets. I already mentioned the vulnerable road user rule with that 15%. And we also are now allowed to spend on safety education with a maximum of 10% of our apportionment allowed. You can see on the graph on the bottom, Georgia is not an outlier when we look at crashes, and we are unfortunately following that nationwide trend of increase in crashes. And the increase we've seen over the last decade is just unacceptable. There's no other way to put it. And so another initiative that FHWA came out with is something called the Safe System Approach. And that's really what's driving in, safety is proactive. Humans are vulnerable, they make mistakes, and we really need this kind of layered approach. They call it the Swiss cheese model. But the idea is if you can layer up your Swiss cheese correctly, right? Because it has holes, no one's perfect. But if you can layer them correctly, your holes won't be overlapping, so you have a full layer of protection, essentially. And so again, when we look, hopefully you can see that, yeah. When we look further into the fatal crashes, specifically in Georgia, now this is 5 years, you can really see all of the different emphasis areas that we have. You can see older drivers, improper occupant protection, vulnerable road users, motorcycle, roadway lane departure. There are all these different emphasis areas, but these also overlap. You can have someone who's driving impaired and runs off the road, someone who's a young driver who's also a cyclist. There are so many overlapping things. So how am I, as a program manager, supposed to identify the best countermeasure to mitigate all of these issues that are so spread out over space and time? And that's how we really develop this systemic approach. And so we use data to develop a standard for the state. And that way it helps driver expectancy as well as allows us to install low-cost countermeasures that are a lot more proactive. I think some initiatives that our program have put out already are, those rumble strips, both centerline and edgeline, cable barriers. I think we have systemic always stop improvements as well. For rumble strips, like transverse rumble strips and approach to the always stop. And we're also looking at potentially installation of always stops at low volume intersections, something that North Carolina came out with. So very excited to start piloting that. So I am now going to turn it over to Risa to get into the hard technical stuff of our actual approach. So please give her a round of applause.
Good morning. Please bear with me. I've had a little too much fun lately, so you might see me reach for the tissues or cough occasionally. I hope everyone is aware of what a school zone is, but if not, the definition is a area within 1,000 feet of the property boundary of a school. For this initiative, the locations that we are using for our analysis is located on state routes. And we are getting these locations off of the master state order. So the purpose of this initiative is it's a multi-phased approach, and it plays back into our safe systems approach and just us being more proactive. And just a little update on our progress. We are finalizing the data analysis and we are heading over to the next stage. And I hope you could see it clearly, but this is our process. So we are currently at the end of phase 1 we're almost at the end of phase 1. We are finalizing our data analysis and heading over to our typical sections. And just to make it a little more clear, phase 1 is our deliverable and phase 2 is how this would be implemented. So for phase 1 includes our data collection. We are looking at risk factors such as traffic volumes, truck percentage, roadway geometry, which includes the presence of a median, if it's undivided or divided, number of lanes, and presence of a horizontal or vertical curve. We are also looking at vehicle speeds and differentials. We're taking a look at the 85th percentile. And a nice thing about ITEER's ClearGuide is that there's certain filters you can toggle on, such as Monday through Friday, when school is in session, just to make sure we're getting a better eyesight of the data. and how drivers are traveling during when school is in session. We are also looking at social vulnerability index. Although it's not a direct risk factor, it does help us identify locations that might not have much access to public transportation or income, or it gives us a more of idea of their housing situation also, but we're using the overall SVI for our data analysis. And we are also gathering crash history, whether that's vehicle pedestrian, or vehicle and bicyclist. So for our data analysis, we have an equation that uses risk factors such as the AEDT, posted speed, delta speed, which is the 85th minus the school zone speed, and the overall SVI value. And by doing so, we're able to generate a prioritization score. And we've also created groups based off of the AEDT and other existing roadway geometry and risk factors, just so we can try to look for any type of trend or pattern to help with our analysis. So I like to call this our countermeasure toolkit. We have 3 targets that we want to address. One is visibility, and we are looking at low-cost signage and pavement marking improvements. I've included an image of a flashing overhead beacon along with a school zone pavement marking. We want to target speed management, and you could see I've provided a speed feedback sign to help encourage drivers to be more aware of what speed they're traveling in as they are approaching or entering a school zone. And last but not least, we want to target enforcement. And this would kind of be our last resort. It's more of like a harsh countermeasure. We're recommending an automated traffic enforcement speed device if we notice that the speed feedback sign is not encouraging travelers to slow down. And so this is kind of our decision tree for our countermeasure selection. It might be a little hard to see, so we'll run through an example together. So we are taking a look at all locations on state routes, and regardless of the prioritization score they receive, they will all be evaluated, and based off of the typical section, if they do not have adequate signage, then we will upgrade or install more signage or pavement markings. We are looking at number of lanes and truck percentage. If we notice that they have a high truck percentage and or 2 or more lanes per direction, then we are recommending the overhead flashers to target that visibility. And we are then taking a look at the 85th percentile, and if we notice they are traveling 5 miles per hour above the school zone speed, then we are recommending the speed feedback sign. And that's for one example. But just because a school has, let's say, a 85th percentile 5 miles above, doesn't necessarily mean they will have overhead flashers. It just depends on what is the existing and what can we do to address those 3 points that I mentioned earlier, which is visibility, speed management, and enforcement. So currently we do not have the typicals yet. We're not at that stage, but we are preparing to get those completed. But we are basing the typicals off of the newest MUTCD, the 11th edition, part 7. I've included an image of all the signage and the combinations of signage that you must include in a school zone or outside of a school zone. And these tiers will determine the prioritization of the projects. We will do packages for quicker delivery. We do understand that the overhead flashes will require a permit process, which is why we have the tiers in place to make sure that we are targeting everything at a nice pace. All the data that we collect, I don't know if you mentioned the data analysis equation did not include the crash history, but all the data we collect will be used for future projects. So we are taking a look at if there is a presence of a crosswalk somewhere in that school zone and the nearest traffic signal. We are also taking a look at pedestrian crashes. So based off of all this data, if we see a need for any type of pedestrian project, we have the data to do some type of pedestrian accommodation projects, or if we see that an intersection or a segment needs some type of traffic operation improvement, then we have all the data to proceed to that being addressed also. So moving on to phase 2. Next would be our implementation and initial evaluation. So let's say we have the typicals. So now we're passing this off with the districts and coordinating with districts and local governments. And we're seeing if, with these upgrades and improvements, if we are noticing any type of change with the 85th percentile, or if we're noticing any type of trend with crashes, or seeing if these recommendations are actually working per se. And like I mentioned, the automated speed enforcement device is part of our last recommendation, just because of the process that undergoes to get that actually implemented. And it's still relatively new. So in 2019, House Bill 978 was signed, and as a result, GDOT policy 672-20 was created. We currently have a research project with Kennesaw State University, which is taking a look at the effectiveness of these speed devices and creating a guidance for continuous usage in Georgia. So the results of this research may affect our policy with the implementation of these devices and also the physical placement of the device itself. And I believe we won't know the results until 2026. I'm correct. So last but not least, we have our final evaluation. We take a look at the crash data and see if perhaps we can do a crash modification factor with the typicals that we created. And going back to the 3 takeaways that I want you to get from this presentation, safety is the priority, safety is proactive, and we all love school zone improvements. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Teresa and Kelly. Next up, we have Christy and Tina. Tina Bockhold is a licensed professional civil engineer with over 10 years of experience and has served as the Tide to Town project manager for the city of Savannah since November. Tina has a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from Georgia Tech. She has worked with the Georgia Department of Transportation and Urban Design, as well as Chatham County Engineering. And Christy Llewellyn Lawrence is a licensed professional civil engineer with over 29 years of experience and has served as the Senior Director of Capital Project Management for the City of Savannah for 6 years. Christy has a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from Duke University and a Master of Business Administration degree from Georgia Southern University. She is an ASCE Fellow and a LEED accredited professional. Christy was recently named the ASCE Georgia Section Civil Engineer of the Year for the 2023 to 2024 year, and was also named as one of the 100 most influential women in Georgia engineering in the March-April issue of Engineering Georgia magazine this year. So thank you for being here.
Good morning. Thanks for having us. We're here from the city of Savannah to talk about the Tide to Town urban trail system. All right, so in a nutshell, key features of the Tide to Town urban trail system, it's ultimately going to be a 30-plus mile loop of continuous transportation systems around, currently pretty much in its infancy stage, I would say. It's going to be an off-road shared use path and barrier-separated on-street bike lanes. Ultimately, it will connect 30 schools, 3 major hospitals, and 62 neighborhoods. And it will maximize use of existing rights of way, reducing the implementation costs. It promotes quality of life, community health, and economic vitality. And the trail will serve a variety of pedestrians and bicyclists, catering to both recreational users and commuters. This is an overview of the phases, and then we'll go into detail of each phase. But Police Memorial Trail was the first phase that we're also calling Truman Trail Phase 1. That phase is complete and in use. Truman Trail Phase 2A is also complete. Truman Trail Phase 2B is under construction. And then we have the Middle Ground Road phase. We're starting design this year. And the next phase, the Montgomery Crossroad phase, is in planning. To date, we've gotten a lot of support and funding for the project. There's a lot of positive momentum in the Savannah area. We got $4 million in ARPA funds, the relief funds after COVID, $1 million in SPLOST 7, $10 million from hotel motel tax. That was just approved last year. $3.75 million in funding from the general fund from the city of Savannah, and also about $6 million in federal funds. So Truman Linear Park Trail is really what started and became Tied to Town. As I mentioned, the Police Memorial Trail was the first trail built. So if this blue line is going to ultimately be Tied to Town, the Police Memorial Trail is on this side of the city here that connects Daffin Park, which is on Victory Drive. I don't know how familiar you guys are with Savannah, but it connects Daffin Park to 52nd Street. And then Phase 2A has already been constructed and is in use, and it connects Trent Avenue down to Lake Mayer. And then 2B connects these two pieces, and we just had the groundbreaking to start construction for that piece. So the Police Memorial Trail was constructed in the early 1990s by Chatham County. It was deteriorating. It runs along a canal there, and it was kind of falling into the canal, and then Hurricane Matthew accelerated the decline. And we had to close the trail in 2016. So a $600,000 repair was approved in February 21, which included replacing the asphalt pavement with concrete and stabilizing the slopes. And we did that work in 21 and reopened the trail in late 21. This is a picture of just the construction of that repair. Phase 2A was a collaboration between Chatham County and the city of Savannah. We reached an initial agreement in 2014. It's about 3.1 miles of 10-foot wide multi-use trail and includes two bridges over the Casey Canal. Construction was managed by the county and began in 2019. It was $6 million in SPLOST funds, and it opened in late 2020. And then the city took over maintenance and operation of the trail. I'm going to turn it over to Tina Bockold, our Tied to Town project manager, to discuss Phase 2B.
Good morning, y'all. Good morning. Well, Truman 2B, he's kind of been around a while, but we have finally got him started. And when I started work in November, I named all my trails. And Truman 2B, he's a bad boy. And he's so bad that I've had him in timeout. And I finally told him, I'm like, okay, you're doing better, and we're going to start you in construction, but you got to be good. So, but Truman 2B, he's going to connect Police Memorial Trail and 2A. And it's going to start, I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with Savannah, but it's going to be at Durin at Jenkins, and then it's going to run up like to 52nd Street Bridge, and you're going to cross over, and then it's going to connect you into the Daffin Park area. So it's really going to be the link that's going to just connect and give you like a nice long trail to walk on or bike. It's going to be 1.8 miles of trail. It's going to be 10-foot concrete shared use path, just like 2A. There'll be timber bridge ditch crossings, and then we've got the shared use path across the 52nd Street Bridge. As I said before, it'll connect Police Memorial to Lake Mayer. We had the groundbreaking July 1st, and that was kind of a well-supported, fun event just because everyone's excited about it. We expect it to take about 1.5 to 2 years. Our contractor that we have under contract to construct is JHC out of South Atlanta. I'm looking forward to getting them started. Construction cost, $8.2 million. And And let's see, where do we go next? The next phases that we're kind of looking at is Middle Ground Road and Montgomery Cross Road. The next one that has like a PI have associated funds for is Middle Ground Road. It's going to connect, it's basically going to connect 204 to 204. It's going to be kind of a loop around that. It's going to connect Georgia Southern to Abercorn at Montgomery Crossroads. And then the next phase, we're in the very early stages of planning and looking at is just taking Montgomery Crossroad, kind of like seems like what y'all are going to do with Memorial. And hopefully we'll get to talk later about that, of taking Montgomery Crossroads and putting some paths kind of like, you know, what he was talking about earlier. So I don't know, lots of things to come in that. In particular, Middle Ground Road phase, it's 2.9 miles of proposed trail. As you can see from the map, we've got one side that's highly dense with commercial and housing, and the other side is Hunter Army Airfield. So it's going to do a good connection to get people on pavement that could serve that area well. That project includes $880,000 of TAP funds, Transportation Alternatives Program. And we're currently in the design negotiations with for a design firm. That's a fun process to go through. It's always something new. We hope to begin design in September. And I'll turn it back over to Christy. Thanks, y'all.
All right, so the Montgomery Crossroad phase would connect the Middle Ground phase that Tina was just talking about that we're about to kick off design back to Lake Mayer. So it'll kind of make it continuous, taking you from south of downtown on Victory Drive all the way south to Georgia Southern Armstrong campus. So that'll be a great connection once we get that done. But we're doing a quarter study and a traffic study of Montgomery Crossroad. It's currently 5 lanes with the suicide lane in the middle, to see if we can support a road diet and turn one of those. Well, really on both sides, we would look at putting a protected trail on both sides of Montgomery Crossroads. So we're hoping that we can do it all with an existing right-of-way and execute this project, hopefully with local funds so we can get it executed quicker. And then we know how important it is to look at how this will be impacting the community. And so we actually put out an RFP and are now under contract. And we called it Equitable Growth, Enhanced Community Engagement, and Project Phase Development. And so we wanted to ensure the project reflects resident input, is managed in coordinated phases, and promotes equitable growth by prioritizing generational wealth building and allowing existing businesses and residents to stay in place. So we're trying to avoid, forced displacement and gentrification. This contract was approved by City Council in June of 24, just last month, in the amount of just under $250,000. And it will allow the city to develop a tied to town implementation strategy that will develop an updated concept alignment informed by community feedback, environmental factors, and infrastructure constraints, including alignment alternatives and access points, and also prioritize equitable and inclusive access for vulnerable and underserved neighborhoods. And that's really all we have for Tied to Town. So.
All right. We do have some time for questions. I have a microphone back there that I'm going to have y'all speak into because we have some viewers online. So I will bring you a microphone.
Thank you. I have a question. The Tied to Town, that sounds really incredible. I've been helping some communities connect through non-motorized roadside greenways and trails in South Carolina. And one of the things that's come up right of way on both sides of the roadway, there are issues with grading, having to incur into property lines, and obviously the difficulties of crossing driveways and other things like that. I guess I'd be curious if you all have thought through any of that, have an approach to any of that, or have maybe set the stage for how that's going. Some of those issues are going to be addressed.
Sure, and we are in the very early planning stages of this. However, there are a lot of driveway crossings, and so we're already looking at how we can minimize that. Do we really need, for a strip mall, say, to have it just wide open to the street, or can we restrict some access? So we've planned for an access management strategy as part of this rating. Like, we haven't got that far, but I will say everything's flat in Savannah, so that will be to our advantage, where hopefully we can stay within the right of way, or maybe just get a construction easement to encroach a little bit during construction.
Okay, great. So that access management strategy will be something that will be developed for like the corridor
Mhm.
per se.
Yes.
That's excellent. Thank you.
You want to add something?
I'll
go
add
ahead.
something. To add on to that, the middle ground road phase I'm talking about, we're really going to get in with that one. That's in a very urban area. The thing about the Truman parts is they are within Truman Parkway's right of way. So there's not a lot of access to commercial. It's kind of right alongside Truman Parkway. So it's kind of real woods, and at part kind of looks like you're in Okefenokee Swamp. It's really pretty if you've never been on it. But I think what we're in right now and what's constructed and what we're fixing to construct is not real urban where we have a lot of that. But middle ground's going to turn that in to something that we have to deal with.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Real quick, just to let you all know, the next session starts at 10 o'clock, which is different than what the program says. We have time for one more question. Yep. Okay, let's go with the online one. We'll mix it up.
All right, it's from Paul Sloan, and he's got a he's got a question on dedicated bike signals in downtown Atlanta, and will they be removed or will exclusive PED phases be created?
Can't speak for the city of Atlanta. I don't know what their plan is. Just I know the ones you're talking about. Those are all, I believe, on local streets. So again, I don't know what their plan is. From a GDOT perspective, where we're putting in new bike signals, so like a Memorial, we will be doing the protected bike phases is our plan. So I don't have a better answer, but that'd be a city of Atlanta question. I don't know.
All right, I think we have time for one more, actually. So. Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you all. Question on the Savannah Trail project. So you mentioned your 1.8 miles is an $8.2 million cost. What are you all seeing drives that cost? Because when you think about it, oh, it's 10 feet of concrete. Now there's a lot more that goes into that. Thank you.
So that is a great question. So I will say that we had a GDOT approved cost estimate. Okay. And we had 3.8 million for the project. And the lowest of three bids was 7.8. And it was a huge shock. But our city council and our leadership was like, we are moving this project forward. We're going to have to make up the difference. And we're trying to scramble to see if there's any way to pursue any additional funds. We haven't been successful so far, but part of it is costs are just a lot higher. But also we do have a bridge crossing over Truman Parkway. That is a big piece of it. And then what were some of the other big drivers of the cost?
One of the things was access.
Yeah.
People that, as I said before, we're right alongside Truman Parkway. There's not a driveway or there's no access to it.
There's also
So,
the canal too.
yeah, the
so,
canal. So, I mean, it's kind of, when you look at the constructability there, I'm pretty sure that's kind of what drove the cost up. Other than that, I don't know.
when we got the 3 in, we're like, whoa, I thought it was supposed to be 3.8. This is double. So we kind of were like, it was kind of a shock. So we still would like to know where all that's going. I still would.
Okay, thanks everyone for the questions. And thanks to our presenters. Session B will be in here throughout the day, and A is in the next room. See y'all at 10.